I'm Hugo Balta.
And I'm Samantha Lampkin.
Next on Chicago Politics, Natalie Edelstein Jarvis, Director of Communications for the DNC, and Emily Soong, Press Secretary for the Democratic National Convention Committee, are with us front and center to discuss next month's Democratic Bloc Party.
And in the segment For the People, I spoke with a few Chicago residents about the DNC coming to town, and I got some real and honest opinions on what they think.
Chicago Politics starts right now. Welcome to Chicago Politics, where we focus on the responses to the social problems that challenge our communities. The Democratic National Convention is coming to Chicago. Approximately 50,000 visitors are expected to descend on the United Center and McCormick Place from August 19 to the 22nd. The summer blockbuster is an economic boost. The DNC is estimated to bring $150 to $200 million to the city, which is still recovering economically from COVID-19. However, the list of concerns about the Democrats' House Party is as long as the list of benefits. Natalie Edelstein Jarvis is Director of Communications for the Chicago DNC Host Committee. Emily Soong is the Press Secretary for the Democratic National Convention Committee. They are front and center with us today. Welcome to you both.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
The DNC is considered a national special security event, which means the Secret Service will be in charge of safety inside the designated footprint of the convention, while Chicago police will be in charge of safety outside of the footprint. In and itself, planning security for an event of this Herculean task, but even more so, it's more difficult after the attempted assassination of former President Donald Trump. Natalie, let's start with you. What has been done to date to ensure the safety of President Joe Biden, the delegates, and of course the public?
Of course. Well, I want to first start by saying, political violence has absolutely no place in our democracy. We have to be better, and I join all of my fellow Americans in, just ensuring that this is a convention where the best of us shines, not the worst of us. And because as you mentioned, it's a national special security event, it's a little bit of a tongue twister. That means Secret Service has been on the ground since we announced the bid. So on April 11th, 2023, a full year ago, Secret Service touched down and started their planning. That means looking at all aspects of the convention, whether that is transportation, security on near and around the airports. Every detail is being considered, and I think one of the big pieces that we need to talk about too is what Chicago Police has done to prepare for this moment. This is a major spotlight for the city, and they've logged more than 400 hours of training to make sure that not just delegates and the president are safe, but that residents and those who are moving about their day-to-day lives don't feel, a big disruption to their day-to-day.
Absolutely. And again, we're talking about something that wasn't just planned in the last couple of weeks, but in the last couple of months. Really, once it was decided it was going to be in Chicago. Now, Emily, Chicago is no stranger to hosting the Democratic National Convention. The city has hosted 25 Republican and Democratic conventions. No other city has done nearly as many. The last time the DNC was here, it was in 1996 when President Bill Clinton was nominated for a second term. The goal of that convention was to erase the violent memories of the 1968 convention with its battles between police and protesters amid demonstrations about the Vietnam War, the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert F. Kennedy. We've seen pro-Palestinian demonstrations escalate on college campuses around the country. There's the ongoing war in Ukraine, the continued unrest over the overwhelming number of asylum seekers being bused from the southern border to sanctuary cities like Chicago. Some social justice groups that were denied permits to protest at the convention have said, we're going to show up anyway. Emily, how do you, I get you plan as much as you can, but how do you plan for the unexpected?
Well, you're exactly right about national special security events. So political conventions on both sides of the aisle have this designation. This is the highest designation of a security that an event can receive. And that puts the full weight of the federal government, the state government, and the local government behind the planning of the security of these events. On top of that, I would just say that we always expect protests at convention. It's baked into our planning. It's something that we plan for every 4 years. We see protests on a whole suite of issues, regardless of what the animating issue of the day is. We always anticipate that people will come to the convention to make their voice heard. And as Democrats, we welcome that. We know that we are a big tent party. We know that everybody's voice matters. And we want to make sure that as much as we want to keep delegates safe, our visitors safe, we also want to make sure that those who are exercising their First Amendment rights are also safe. And CPD, Superintendent Snelling, have been really clear messengers on this, that they want to make sure that those protesting are also safe, and there will be precautions taken to make sure that they can do so.
Great, and as we've seen so far in the Republican National Convention, there have been protests, but everything has been orderly and under control. Now let's move into a little bit about what happens at the DNC. The Democrats have been hosting this party since 1852. Emily, for people that are not as familiar with what happens in a convention as the delegates are, what's the 411 on the DNC?
Well, you're exactly right. Conventions are steeped in tradition. Not only is it the party of the summer, but it's also where we come together to do the critical business of democracy. So come August, you're going to see Democrats gathering here from all 50 states, the United States territories, the District of Columbia, and from Democrats abroad. And they're going to be gathering here to rally behind the Biden-Harris nomination, to chart a course for the next 4 years, and to also reflect on what we've accomplished over the last 4 years. So this is not only where we're going to be, celebrating and rallying and energizing to head into this critical election year. This is also where we're going to be charting a path to, really set our agenda for what we want to do with this country and how we want to move America forward.
And look, it's a massive event. It takes a small village to plan and execute such an event. 12,000 plus volunteers, I think I read last time. Natalie, can you talk to us about that initiative and how that provides an opportunity to be inclusive of the Chicagoland community and adds authenticity to the event that we're going to be seeing in August?
Well, absolutely. That block party that Emily mentioned is powered by Chicagoans. We had the Herculean task of recruiting 12,000 volunteers. I'm proud to sit here to say, and we've exceeded that. We are well on our way to 14,000. But I think what really matters is who those people are. We worked with neighborhood ambassadors in all 77 community areas as a program that the host committee stood up to find liaisons, community leaders in areas across the city to help make sure that when delegates step through those doors, they saw all of Chicago represented. So we have all zip codes represented in our volunteer corps. Almost 70% of our volunteers are from Illinois more broadly. So you'll see folks from downstate, you'll see folks from Chicago. And I think what's so exciting is this volunteer corps is showing up for the city. They're showing up because this is a chance to show, the 15,000 members of the media in town, the delegates, all of the folks who are coming out, what Chicago's made of. We're tough, we're working people, and they are the ones who, at the airports, hotels, McCormick Place, United Center, they're the ones that are going to help you get from point A to point B, who are really the muscle and the might behind this convention. So while there is a lot of politics and party business happening, it's also a real celebration of Chicago's diversity, our strength, and you'll see all 77 community areas represented inside the hall, and I think that's remarkable.
Yeah, it's a wonderful opportunity to showcase what's best about Chicago. And off camera, we were talking about sometimes Chicago gets a bad rap. Look, I can make the case for deep dish pizza, Chicago-style hot dogs, sports, music. The list is long. But why Chicago? How did Chicago become the beneficiary of such a wonderful event?
I'm so glad you asked that because, yes, we have great food and we have, great sports, but one of the real reasons we were picked is we are no stranger to political events. This will be our 26th political convention, as you mentioned, but Chicago has not just the infrastructure, the transportation systems, the hotels, the compact footprint. We also have the human infrastructure. We have folks that do this day in and day out. In fact, the weekend after the convention, Chicago's actually welcoming a surgical convention that has larger attendance than 50,000 people. So we are really pros when it comes to this. We have folks who, host conventions all the time, large-scale events like Lollapalooza or the NATO Summit. These were hosted in Chicago. And not to mention, we also have really tight policy alignment with the Biden administration. This is a union town. This is a city that's representative of the Midwest and, America's diversity more broadly. So we really are just the perfect place to tell President Biden's story, which I think Emily could probably get into better detail than I could.
That's exactly right. And, we have the infrastructure, but we also have the political significance. This is a town that gave us Barack Obama, a star of the Democratic Party, and has just been steeped in, Democratic tradition for decades. And we know that Chicago sits right at the heart of the Midwest. This is the heartland of the country. Some people might call it flyover country, but we know this is a powerful part of the country that really decides elections. In 2020, the Blue Wall was made up of many Midwestern states that were critical to the Biden-Harris victory. And we know that the election is going to be fought and won right here again in the Midwest. So, Chicago really represents what's possible under Democratic leadership. We have amazing Democratic leaders from Mayor Johnson to Governor Pritzker. And all across the Midwest, we see what Democratic governors and Democratic legislatures are able to achieve. They've really been able to deliver historic progress that's in line with the Biden-Harris administration's policies, and they've really impacted many real Americans' lives, and those are the stories that you're going to hear at convention.
I think the deep dish doesn't hurt, though.
I won't argue that. Natalie, Emily, hang tight. After the short break, we will continue the conversation on the DNC and the economic opportunity now, during, and after the convention. As well, my colleague, lead correspondent Samantha Lampkin, asked the people what they think about the DNC coming to Chicago. All that and more when Chicago Politics comes back.
On the next Chicago Newsroom 2.0, we'll unpack the Supreme Court's decision to provide cover to the former president, the state's newly approved budget, and the 900-page plan that poses the greatest threat to American democracy yet. Join the conversation on CAN TV, cable channel 19, or stream live on cantv.org or on the CAN TV Plus app. Hyper-local news and public affairs. Experience the power of community television.
You're watching Chicago Politics, where we focus on the responses to the social issues challenging our communities. The DNC will be more than just 4 days of fanfare and primetime speeches. It would also be, as Alderman Gilbert Villegas, serving the 36th Ward, has said, an opportunity to boost and invest in our local businesses so they can benefit long past August. Natalie, how are Chicago and small businesses benefiting now, and how will they once the delegates go home?
Well, I'm so glad you asked, because the convention really is a major economic opportunity for the city. Previous host cities have experienced between 150 and $200 million of economic impact. And for the host committee, what we wanted to see was that economic impact spread as wide as possible. So as many people across the Chicagoland region getting a piece of this economic pie. And we've done that in a few different ways. I think on our contracting front, we've made some incredible milestones for the first time ever in convention history. We have a Southside-based, Black-owned firm serving as the Exposition Services contract. It's one of the large contracts that puts on the show inside of the convention hall. We have a women-owned team who's teamed with a Latino-owned organization to help us put on our big 3 events. We have gone far and wide to source local, diverse firms for our convention, and we're very proud of the story that we can tell on the contracting side. But even broader than that, we have been thinking about what happens after the convention. And one of the primary things that we've heard from vendors and venues is that there's a lot of fanfare around the 4 days, and then everybody goes home. And so from day one, we have set out to create resources that exist long after the convention. And 2 that I would draw your attention to are our vendor directory and venue map. These are livable resources. You can find them on our website, but for those 50,000 people that are traveling in town, they're planning parties, meetings, ancillary events all over the city. and they come to the host committee looking for recommendations for those events. So we've been able to put together on the vendor directory side more than 2,600 local diverse vendors who are available for any party planning service you could imagine. So from security services to florists to caterers to venues, we've been able to source local talent and provide that directly to visitors coming in town so that they can book. But after the convention, these are great resources, and so we're turning these over to local chambers, to Enjoy Illinois and Choose Chicago, our tourism agencies. We think that, moving forward, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. Chicago is a large-scale event destination, and we hope that in the future, when people come in town and are looking to book, events and parties and things that have to do with their large-scale events, they're using our repositories. They're using our local talent. And I think just more broadly, any opportunity we have to highlight and spotlight local talent, we have taken that. So we brought the state party chairs to Bronzeville Winery. We've taken delegates and other volunteers to Pullman National Monument. We brought folks, to Garfield Park. So we're really trying to spotlight the city, to show people what exists here beyond just the Loop and the West Loop. And we view this as a major opportunity. There are going to be local, diverse vendors powering this convention, and that is because of the resources that we've created.
Yeah, and as you both mentioned, we have a lot of people who are coming to Chicago for the first time, not just within the country, but outside the country. And so, as you said, there might be a misconception that everything that happens in the DNC is happening at the convention, but there's so many opportunities and so many events that are happening in different neighborhoods. Anything to add, Emily, in regards to, again, spotlighting Chicago, but an investment in the community that happens long after the convention's gone?
Yeah, I would just echo what Natalie said about making sure that the Democrats who come through town, whether they be delegates, visitors, media, whoever they are, making sure that we take them outside of the central business district to really spotlight what Chicago has to offer. I think the Chicago that people see on the news is not the Chicago that real Chicagoans experience. So we want to make sure that everyone who comes through the city sees the best of what the city has to offer, sees its people, the amazing people who power the city, and just really sees the love and all the amazing things that, we see while we're here.
Yeah, and chip away a lot of that bias that happens. That's really misconceptions about, as you've mentioned, who and what Chicago is. I'm sorry, you were going to say something?
I was just going to say, even in this job, I have been exposed to so much of the city, restaurants, caterers, venues that I didn't even know existed. And so even for personal purposes, I find the vendor directory and some of the resources we have to be just an amazing repository of all that Chicago can do. I mean, we really have somebody for everything. And I think that's remarkable.
Yeah. Before I let you go, I did want to talk about this effort being the most accessible, sustainable, and inclusive convention. The Chicago 2024 Host Committee announced the formation of 3 additional advisory councils to make recommendations, as you've already mentioned, on best practices for youth engagement, accessibility, and labor relations. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, I think from the beginning, we knew that we needed to bring the community in for this to be successful. And so Chicago is a diverse and robust city that is made up of tons of people who have all types of different lived experiences. And in order for us to plan a successful event, we needed to include those lived experiences. So we've brought in an accessibility advisor who has given us, incredible best practices on how to make sure everybody can enjoy this convention regardless of, their lived experience, their background, their abilities. We've brought in labor advisors to help us liaise with the local unions that are a core piece of Chicago's, history. We have worked directly with youth organizations and with actual, 22 and under students to tell us, how can we make this an experience that you want to participate in? We really want this to be, a convention that everybody feels a part of. We don't want it to be sort of the stale, your grandma's convention. And so we've gone to, some great lengths to make sure that everybody has some sort of investment in the event. And I think we've done a lot of innovating since 2022 to make sure that happens.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, reflective of not just geography, lived experiences, and other. The last thing I wanted to ask, and we talked a little bit about this, another innovation that we'll see at the DNC are content creators. Tell us about that, because I think it's really important to produce content where people are consuming it and not necessarily just strictly legacy media.
That's exactly right. It's 2024. You know, the last time we had an in-person convention was 2016. So 8 years have gone by. The world is different. The way people consume information is entirely different. In 2020, we were forced to innovate because of the COVID-19 pandemic and really think through how we presented a convention to the American people and how we still made sure that we were reaching a broad audience. We were able to make some really great progress then by, introducing remote interviews and all sorts of remote sites for our programming that really made sure that people across the country could engage with our convention. And we learned that even returning to an in-person convention, some of those innovations were the best part of 2020, and people really enjoyed being able to feel part of the convention, people who might not traditionally be inside of the hall. As you mentioned, sometimes it feels like party business. It doesn't feel like something that's accessible to regular people. So we're really excited, and this year we were able to announce that we were credentialing content creators for the first time in history. No political convention has done this before, and this is something that is really going to allow us to reach new audiences. So not just young people, but people in communities all across the country who trust these voices, trust these creators. These are people who, we know might not watch 2 hours of primetime television during the 4 days of convention, but they still want to engage with our content. They still want to hear the message of Democrats. They want to know who we are as a party. And we're hoping that by bringing content creators into the United Center, into McCormick Place to engage with our activities, that they will help to bring our message out to the American people, so that whether you're scrolling on your phone, watching TV, getting a text from a friend, scrolling TikTok, you can engage with the content of the convention and you can take part in this critical part of the democratic process. It's not just something for party insiders. It's something that all of us should engage with, because a lot is on the line in November, and we want to make sure that people hear what's at stake.
Emily, Soong, Natalie, Edelstein, Jarvis, thank you so much for your time and for your insights. Best of luck with the convention. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Our pleasure. Chicago Politics returns on the other side of the break. Please stay with us.
On the next edition of The Compassionate Competitor, I'll sit in conversation with former NFL player and founder of Win Performance, Kerry Neal.
Everybody want it fast. Be willing to put the work in.
Join the conversation Thursday, July 25th at 7 p.m. on CAN TV Cable Channel 19, or stream live on cantv.org or the new CAN TV Plus app. Elevated conversation and storytelling. Experience the power of community television.
When the city of Chicago won the bid for the DNC, it was a win for the city. But as lawmakers prepare to come to the city, are the residents of Chicago really ready? Chicago Politics lead correspondent Samantha Lampkin spoke to business owners and residents in the South Loop with some rapid-fire questions about the DNC's Chicago arrival. Samantha?
Thank you, Ugo. In less than a month, the Democratic National Convention is descending into Chicago. Delegates, activists, and leaders will gather for the official nomination of the party's president and vice presidential candidates. But do the people of Chicago really know about DNC's impact, and do some even really care? That's what I found out on today's For the People. What does the DNC stand for?
Democratic National Convention.
How often is the Democratic National Convention held?
I hope it's every 4 years.
Every 4 years.
I am super excited. Anything that comes to Chicago that increases our tourism, increases the opportunity for people to get a chance to see our beautiful city is always invigorating for me.
It's a great opportunity for all business owners. It's going to cause more people from around the world to come into and get a glimpse at what we do here at Sip and Savor. The foot traffic going to pick up. They'll be exposed to our great customer service. So it's a great opportunity for us to not only make money, but be on a global stage.
I actually do think that the DNC will have a positive impact on Chicago, Illinois. I think it's good to bring the awareness to Chicago, even though some people might not be as familiar with politics. So just by the DNC coming to Chicago and just the marketing and promotion of it, it will raise awareness. Maybe not in a huge sense, but it will make an impact.
Oftentimes when we hear Chicago in the news, it's something negative. So to have the DNC here, I think allows for a positive spin on our city. And again, just an opportunity for business owners to see an increase in revenue and people to just get to enjoy our beautiful city. I feel like Chicago is a major city. We always have different things, festivals, concerts, NASCAR, and we're always able to handle those. And so I have full confidence that the city will be able to ensure everyone's safety.
DNC.
DNC,
Coming
let's
to
go.
Chicago. Let's go. Well, Ugo, the people have spoken and opinions are still mixed. Now, some people are still unsure and probably think the DNC stands for donuts and coffee, while others are excited about the potential economic boost and increased visibility for the city.
Thank you, Samantha.
Absolutely.
Next on Chicago Politics, Mayor Brandon Johnson does an about-face on a plan to fight chaotic Chicago teen trend meetups and illegal parties. Pass-fail is next.
Hi, I'm Ashley Munson, and I'm inviting you to join me and my Chief of Staff, Justin James, and the band with no name for the next episode of Munson Tonight. Each month, we'll do our level best to make politics make sense, engaging with political leaders and the politically adjacent in an effort to glean understanding and genuine insight into the deals and the deal makers who, by design, work for you and not the other way around. Join the conversation Thursday at 7:30 p.m. on CAN TV Cable Channel 19 or stream live on cantv.org, or you can even try the new CAN TV Plus app. Hyper-local news and public affairs. Experience the power of community television.
Now it's time for Pass-Fail, where we take a look at our elected officials and see if they're making the grade. We begin with Mayor Brandon Johnson. He's backed away from a plan to fight chaotic Chicago teen trend meetups and illegal parties that sometimes end in gun violence after concerns that the proposal would unintentionally crack down on protests such as the pro-Palestinian encampments that popped up at Chicago University this spring pass. Yes, there is pressure to solve gun violence, but as Alderman Daniel Laspada, First Ward, said, there's got to be more thoughtfulness in introducing legislation. I agree. Too often, a rush to fix one problem creates another. Next, Chicago Police Department. I have Alderwoman Nicole Lee, 11th Ward, on the line. Please pick up. Lee, who heads the City Council's Women Caucus, wants an explanation for the low arrest rates in cases where women are stalked and harassed on social media. Fail. A Chicago Tribune investigation found that Chicago police arrested only 2% of the domestic-related electronic harassment and cyber-stalking complaints received in the past 10 years. The arrest rate last year was about 1%. And Juliet de Jesus Alejandre, the executive director of Palenque LSNA, recently spoke to WTTW about an anti-gentrification ordinance that looks to curb rapid redevelopment near the 606 and in Pilsen. Developers would have to pay a surcharge of $60,000 to demolish a detached house, townhouse, or two-flat, and $20,000 per dwelling for demolishing a multi-unit residential building. Pass. The money collected from the surcharge will partly go towards a community land trust to keep homes affordable. De Jesus Alejandre said the proposal would help protect existing residents from unscrupulous developers. The ordinance expires in December. Community members and older people have until then to create a much-needed permanent legislation. And that does it for this edition of Chicago Politics. A special thank you to Natalie, Edelstein, Jarvis, and Emily Soong for joining us.
And a shout out to the folks at Sip and Savor Coffee House in the South Loop who took the time to speak with me on For the People. Thank you all for joining us on Chicago Politics,
where we go beyond the surface level discussions and dive deep into the societal issues that are impacting the diverse communities in Chicago.
Let's continue the conversation by going on social media at CAN TV Chicago and via email chicagopolitics@cantv.org.
On behalf of all of us here at Chicago Politics, thank you for investing your time with us.